Young people in this country are feeling a tremendous amount of frustration when it comes to what they view as the basic necessities of life. And young men in particular, those who powered Donald Trump to victory back in 2024, well, they're feeling a lot of regret over their vote choice. So what are we talking about here? Well, let's talk about what is right at the bottom. If you were building out the house in terms of the American dream, it is literally the ability to buy a home. And young people, well, there's not a lot of hope for them when it comes to buying a home, and these numbers have changed tremendously. Look at this. Okay, age 18 to 34, that is adults under the age of 35, will buy a home in the next 5 years. You go back to 2016, 2018, Gallup's.
They actually thought a billionaire convicted of 34 counts of financial fraud was going to fix their bank accounts. That is not a political opinion. That is the documented collapse of an entire demographics trust, playing out in real time, measured in polling numbers so severe that the analysts brought on live television to explain them are running out of adequate language to describe what they are seeing. 1 year ago, young men were the engine of this political victory. Today, they are the loudest and most measurable signal of its failure. That shift alone should stop every serious observer cold, because when a coalition this significant reverses this completely and this quickly, it does not happen without cause. It does not happen without a reason that demands serious, undistracted attention from everyone paying close attention to where the numbers are moving. The data did not drift. It collapsed.
That's a drop of 34 percentage points from where Donald Trump was in term number one, in terms of young folks saying it's a good time to find a job. And young men in particular, those who powered Donald Trump to victory, well, they are feeling a lot of frustration with the economy. Not a big surprise when they say it's hard to find a job and say, in fact, their aim to buy a home has fallen below 50%. Look at this. Young men on the economy, those that powered Trump to victory, men under 30 on economic conditions. Before Trump came into office, this is 2024 and early 2025, before Trump was inaugurated for a second term, 66% of them said it.
Before the second inauguration, 66% of men under 30 already believed economic conditions were poor. They knew things were difficult, but they trusted the promise of something better, the specific, repeated, and unambiguous promise that this administration would fix prices, restore opportunity, and finally put working people ahead of every other priority. Fast forward to today, and 79% of those exact same young men now describe the economy as poor. Only 1 in 5 believes anything is genuinely going well. That is not a correction. That is a verdict, delivered by the precise group of people who voted to make this administration possible. Consider what that verdict means for something as foundational as housing. In 2016 and 2018, 53% of adults under 35 felt confident they would own a home within 5 years. That number now sits at 29%. The aspiration itself is disappearing. Young men are not debating when they will buy their first home. They have quietly stopped asking the question entirely because the answer has started to feel genuinely insulting against the financial reality they are living through every month.
Surveys, look at that. The majority, 53%, said they would buy a home in the next 5 years, those who didn't already own one. That number has fallen through the floor. Look at this now in 2025, 2026, just 29%, just 29%. That is nearly half the level, dropped by nearly half in just under a decade's time. No wonder young people are feeling so much frustration. Now, of course, if you're building out that home, right, in terms of what young people want, what Americans want in order to fulfill the American dream, well, it's not just buying a home, it's a...
The job market tells the same story, moving with the same trajectory, in the same relentless direction. 4 years ago, 75% of young people believed it was a good time to find meaningful work. Today, that number has fallen to 43%, a 32-point collapse. Return to 2019, the final year of the first term, when 77% of young people held that exact confidence, and the full arc of decline becomes completely undeniable. This is not a market responding to global conditions beyond any single government's control. This is a generation responding directly and specifically to commitments that were made to them in exchange for their votes and then quietly abandoned. And this is precisely the moment where the numbers become genuinely difficult to hold in your mind all at once. In the fall of 2024, young men trusted this administration on the economy over the Democratic nominee by 7 points, 7 whole points. That margin defined a historic coalition and was celebrated loudly as a realignment of genuine generational significance. Today, the net approval rating on economic performance among that same group sits at negative 59 points. That is a 66-point swing in under 18 months. It's not a gradual erosion, a free fall that pollsters are describing as one of the fastest demographic approval collapses recorded in modern American political history. They are not being hyperbolic or dramatic. The documented data supports that characterization with uncomfortable and very specific precision.
Men under 30, these again are the voters who powered Trump to victory back in 2024. In the fall of 2024 versus Kamala Harris, Trump was more trusted on the economy than Harris by, get this, a 7-point margin. Holy Toledo, look at that percentage now. Look at how young men have turned. The net approval among young men for Donald Trump and the economy, minus 59 points. I'm laughing because the turn is so absurd. This is a turnaround of, what is this? Do the math with me right here, of 66 points. 66 points in less than 2 years' time, just a year and a half in terms of feeling towards Trump and the economy among.
The overall numbers follow the exact same trajectory. He won the young male vote by a single point in 2024, the first Republican nominee this century to accomplish that. His net approval with that same demographic now stands at negative 55 points. The coalition that was treated as a historic generational breakthrough has become the most energized and most measurable opposition force currently operating inside the American political landscape. Let that settle for exactly one moment, not to editorialize, but to let the complete scale of these reversals register properly. 66 points on economic trust, 56 points overall. These are not the numbers of an administration that simply disappointed a constituency. These are the numbers of a promise made personally and specifically to a generation, and then personally and specifically abandoned without acknowledgement. Now, the foreign policy numbers arrive and they carry their own separate force. He campaigned on a direct and explicit promise: no new foreign entanglements, peace through demonstrated strength without committing American lives to conflicts overseas. Young men trusted him on foreign policy by 9 points in 2024. Today, that number stands at negative 54 points, a 63-point reversal on the single issue that carries the most personal and irreversible weight for men of enlistment age. The concern about military conflict is no longer theoretical or rhetorical. It is present in conversations, embedded in polling data, and driving a focused and specific fury in the demographic that would bear the greatest personal cost of any serious escalation abroad. When a young man who voted specifically against foreign military involvement watches that involvement expanding and hears silence from the people he supported and defended publicly, the betrayal stops being abstract. It becomes biographical. It reconfigures how he understands every decision he made and every opposing argument he dismissed at the time. The downstream political consequences are now fully and clearly visible across the entire electoral landscape. In November 2024, Democrats won young men in congressional races by just 3 points, a razor-thin margin that reflected genuine competitive tension for that vote. Today, Democrats lead the generic congressional ballot among men under 30 by 28 points. 25 points of movement concentrated almost entirely within this single demographic, produced inside a single political cycle. Republican strategists are not publicly disputing these numbers. They are trying to assess whether anything structural can reverse this trajectory before the 2026 midterms arrive and deliver their own unambiguous verdict. The damage extends well beyond the current administration and its immediate approval numbers.
Well, the two Republican frontrunners, take a look at the net approval among men under 30, 2028 GOP contenders. J.D. Vance, 48 points underwater, 48 points underwater. Of course, he being the secretary, being the vice president. Sometimes all these cabinet officials get him stuck in my head. The vice president, though a member of the cabinet, 48 points underwater. Look at the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. He's doing a little bit better, but not really much better. He is 39 points underwater. So the deficit that Trump is facing now among young men, that is transferring over to the cabinet members as well.
J.D. Vance, the vice president and the party's most prominent future contender, is 48 points underwater with men under 30. Marco Rubio sits at 39 points below water with the same group. The two figures most likely to carry this political banner forward are entering a defining election cycle already buried under historic deficits with the voters a national victory requires. That is not a messaging problem. That is a credibility problem. And credibility is not rebuilt through a single campaign cycle or a single strategic pivot. Something considerably deeper is shifting beneath all of these individual numbers, and polling data captures only part of what is actually happening. The men moving away from this administration are not doing so quietly or reluctantly. They are doing so with the particular kind of anger that comes from having believed something completely, acted on it publicly and vocally, and then watched the documented results arrive in their own bank accounts, their own job searches, their own conversations about a future that keeps receding. That anger does not dissipate after a midterm election cycle, and it hardens into a durable and self-reinforcing political identity. Voters who feel genuinely deceived rarely return to the source of the deception. They spend the years that follow making sure the people around them do not make the same mistake. Long-term supporters who gave this administration every available benefit of the doubt are now speaking in language that goes well beyond ordinary frustration. They are using the language of permanent reassessment, not disappointment, not temporary disillusionment that will fade once circumstances improve. Permanent reassessment. That distinction matters more than any individual polling number because one describes a temporary emotional state and the other describes a closed door that campaign rhetoric alone does not reopen. The generation that was told it was finally being seen, finally being represented, finally being placed ahead of donor priorities and institutional inertia is now carefully and methodically tallying what that representation actually cost in concrete terms. The coverage they lost, the wages that never arrived, the futures that were deferred, and the promises that were not kept. The tally is still being calculated, and the 2026 cycle will add its own final line. Before we close, one quick clarification. Everything discussed in this script is drawn entirely from publicly available polling data, documented policy records, and published political analysis from mainstream sources. This is not a call to action of any kind. Reasonable people can and do examine identical facts and reach genuinely different conclusions, and that kind of honest, substantive disagreement is worth pursuing seriously and respectfully. The goal here is never to instruct you on what to think or how to vote. It is to take the available evidence seriously and follow it with discipline. If you see this situation differently, the comments section is the right place for that conversation. If you want to keep following stories like this one with the same level of rigor and honesty they deserve, subscribing keeps that work going.